Welcome back, everyone, to another Let's Play on Ratchet and Clank. We're going to talk about Rutherford B. Hayes. I do apologize. I don't think there's any sound in the last part. It is what it is. We're just going to keep playing. It's going to be a very weird part where there's going to be just no volume whatsoever. Do apologize. And, yeah, we're just going to keep going. We're going to go for it. Now this part is where we can make our money. I'll put it that way. Oh lordy. Okay. Oh, good lord. Of course y'all come. Today, though, just like the pre-Civil War presidents, we're going to talk about the post-Civil War presidents, which don't get a lot of notoriety and aren't really talked about in history books. It's always talked about in the context of the country, but a lot of these guys tend to be very, let's say, instrumental in what eventually becomes the United States of America. Yeah. Still alive, down, still alive. The next one, though, is going to be Rutherford B. Hayes, who becomes our 19th President of the United States of America. He's an interesting one. He's one I also go back and forth on, because I think he is... When I first read about him, and I learned about him more and more, I tended to have a much more negative outlook on him, both as a leader, as an individual. In a lot of ways, I see him as this trend for Republicans around this time to bring in, elect, and vote for these people who tend to be what I guess you would constitute as a moderate. In a lot of aspects, in a lot of ways. He is the quintessential example of what a moderate is. He was born in Ohio, Delaware, Ohio, in around like the 1820s, I believe. 1822, something like that. Lives in a pretty, I guess you would probably say, like a middle class kind of life. His parents were store people, like they just owned like a a general store in Ohio. He comes from like British or like he like his people and his family that he came from originally were like from New England originally before they immigrated to Ohio. He ends up going to school, law school, pretty mundane life, meets a beautiful lady that he calls his own named Lucy, becomes his wife. I think all in all they have 4 or 5 kids. I think he has like 1 or 2 of them during the Civil War, 3 before. Something along those lines. Now, he grew up Episcopalian. I think his wife's a Methodist, which really leaned into him changing a lot of his views on things. Not to mention the fact that his wife was an abolitionist, and he really wasn't, because he was opposed to slavery, but he wasn't like, well, that doesn't mean we should just free them all, you know. He's literally the quintessential example of what a moderate is. And growing up in the North, he and his family were very into politics, specifically with Whigs and those ideals, functionally. I'm 13? Perfect. Now, you see, the more I get, the more I can sell them and get more money. I mean, hell, just by going off of this, I could probably get my Rhino if I played my cards right. But ultimately, he ends up going to law school, goes to becoming a really good attorney for a lot of people, specifically a defense attorney. The reason why I always look at him is like, as an interesting person, is or not as an interesting person, but why I have a lot of skepticism in a lot of ways is that he just reminds me of one of those, like, you know, defense attorney people who like constantly put their ads on TV. I will represent you no matter what, you know. And that's just how I look at him. You know, fair or not, but he and his family moved to Cincinnati, becomes a prominent lawyer in Cincinnati as a defense attorney. I think there's one case where he gets someone off based off of insanity, even though that person, pretty sure that person like killed someone. But instead of getting hung in the gallows, he gets him off with the plea of insanity, and they just spend the rest of their life in a mental institution. Still, point being, he's just someone who is just a moderate. I don't think he's just actually like corrupt in any way. I will say I think he's someone who does chase glory and wants prominence. You know, he's just one of these people that, like, the more I read between the lines of the history books, because I think books tend to make him seem like, oh, he's just an average Joe who just wants to do his duty, quiet, just gonna humble and all that, and I don't believe that. In particular, it's his time during the Civil War that ultimately leads me to believe otherwise. So first and foremost, before he becomes a lawyer, he's thinking about joining the military to fight in the Mexican-American War at around 18, 19 years old, but pretty much gets off because of medical issues, which, it's whatever. He basically just, it's like, hey, or is advised, let's say, that he shouldn't fight and participate in the war because of the strain that it would take in his body, especially fighting in another country, in Mexico. He wasn't a sickly kid or anything like that, not like previous presidents or even future presidents, but certainly someone who I don't know would last very well and long within the realities of war.
Put it in a slot. The weapon you want modified, put it in a slot.
Oh yeah, weapon modifications.
Yep, I can take your puny little weapon, and with a few, tweaks, I can turn it into a powerful piece of equipment. Look, you want me to hook you up or what? I can't hang around here all day.
What is the lock-on mod? Why not? Let's just go for it, people. Alright, Slim. So right now we're just going to try and collect as many as we can. Probably won't get them all, but we will try. And normally I would try to get them all, but I don't think I have the patience for it. And I'm a pretty patient person, so... Or at least I'd like to think of myself as a patient person. Of course I don't have my metal boots yet. That's what I think about when I think about Rutherford B. Hayes. I just think of someone who... I don't know why history books tend to go down this direction. I think we tend to look at people a lot more highly than we normally do. But I think a lot of things with Rutherford B. Hayes lead me to believe that he's... Because historically, by like modern interpretations of things, he would be considered a moderate, which I think that's just a misnomer. I mean, you can have opinions on things, but in particular, I'm like, why the history books continually say these things? I don't know. I don't think he was entirely a moderate. Of course, he had opinions, but they make such an emphasis on the fact that he was a moderate, and I think it was mainly because of two things. Because during his presidency, actually, let me explain. Back when Abraham Lincoln's president, you know, and this is just politics in general, you're gonna have different sections and sects of party alignment and affiliation in a lot of ways. Like, let me give you an example. It's like today, for instance, you have people who would be considered, say, in the Republican Party today, you know, very MAGA-like people who tend to be much more a part of certain things and have very strong opinions on specifically border economics, realities of excessive government intervention, and tend to be much more economically libertarian and stuff like that. And then you have, like, you know, what people would probably say are rhinos, who are like more moderate, who focus more on social issues and government control than anything else in a lot of ways. It's kind of like that in a lot of ways, back then even. The Republicans back then were considered either half-breeds, I think was the term that they coined, or stalwarts. And stalwarts were the ones who were like, we are going to do this, we're going to do that, you know. And then half-breeds were, I think it was James G. Blaine, who I think was one of the prominent Republican politicians of his time, who was a half-breed, who was much more concerned, I think, with James G. Blaine. I don't know why, he just reminds me of like Marco Rubio today, you know, or I don't know, I can't think of a good example. Ah, crap. Oh well. I'm almost there, people. Told you this is where I'm gonna get all my money. But people, I think, historically have looked at him in this particular way because of the fact that Rutherford B. Hayes first is going to be a stalwart, or not stalwart, a half-breed. And in particular, half-breeds believed, and I think the big differentiation between the two was stalwarts were like, we're going to do things based off of the best available candidate in a lot of ways, and then half-breeds were more along the lines of a meritocracy, merit-based system. If you're, it's kind of like the way they would go about it is like, we're just going to choose someone who has the most experience, yada yada, and first come, first serve in a lot of ways, which does become an issue with the next 2 terms as president for Garfield and Arthur, and it's very interesting. But my point ultimately is that it seems like they're trying to paint him as something that ultimately he's not entirely. And I just think it's revisionism to paint him in a particular way that I don't think is entirely accurate or fair, if that makes any sense. 2 seconds, gotta text someone. But Civil War breaks out. He ends up joining the army of the Shenandoah, in particular, which I think is basically just the West Virginian contingent, effectively, of the Civil War. Now his military service is really all over the place. He is one of the few that congressional people and politicians who do actually face quite a bit of combat, actually. This leads to him actually at one point getting shot. He loses it on his horse. A lot of people don't take him seriously initially, but ultimately does get enough accommodation and recommendations to be like an actual brigadier general, which I think that's just because of how popular he is. I don't know, can you just imagine like one of those famous lawyers just who's like on TV and it's like, oh, fighting in a war and now you're like a general. Crazy, right? I know. But because of that, he does have a decent military record, which leads to him having a lot of popularity and at least some name recognition, and particularly in Congress, which I think was one of the big things. I don't know whose hands he had to shake, but it's part of it. And then once the war ends, he has continues to have and raise his family. This leads to him deciding he's gonna run for politics at the behest of a lot of friends and advice of relatives, both as a means to make money, obviously, and to make more name recognition for himself. He tries to be a lawyer, but ultimately, once he leaves, his practice is largely left, not in shambles or anything, but it's like, he's got to start back from square one to rebuild his clientele and client base, even with the name recognition, so it just seems smart for him to go about doing things like that. So, basically, he runs for politics, and in particular, during the Andrew Johnson presidency, he wins his election to the House, becomes a prominent member within the House, specifically on the side of James G. Blaine as a politician, as one of these half-breed people. Boom. Oh, that was on point. I'm proud of myself for that one. Why is that thing running away? Chicken. Chicken. Coward. I think I'm going to try to get 60, and then I'll probably end this part. Because, and probably continue, because I definitely need to get to other presidents and other parts. He does make a name for himself in the House as a prominent politician, has a lot of pull. Ohio's slowly becoming one of the bigger states, just like Virginia was back during the times of our revolution. Again, he's very adamant about being a half-breed and a moderate. Ends up siding a lot with James G. Blaine, again, who just has a lot of pull back then. Blaine, I don't like him historically. It's actually objectively just not kind to him. One of the few that's actually like, ooh, you know. But Blaine's like a prominent person. Like, he ends up being like the Secretary of State for a bunch of people, I think, or he attends a couple presidential cabinet positions. Oh crap! That one's on me. Ugh, good lord. Explode. Okay. Hang on one second. Yeah, I'm not gonna mess with that. Not until I get some more razor blade. Ah, God. Of course. This is really working out in my favor so far. Almost there. So I think there's like 80 or 90 that I can probably collect, but that's just gonna take way too long. And I don't have the time or the patience for that. 'Cause I'm here to talk about history, folks. Now, I will say this. I think the one thing about Hayes that I do agree with in terms of his historical relevance and presence in just terms of the books and history is that I don't think he ever really wanted to be president. I think so. He runs, I think, 2 or 3 terms in the House. Ends up leaving the federal government and runs for governor of Ohio. Becomes the governor of Ohio. Doesn't really do anything too crazy there. Ends up leaving politics, trying to practice his law firm, but a little hard to do so. And I think if he could just retire and live a normal life, I think he probably would have, but I think money was a big reason why he ended up basically running for the presidency at a certain point. At the very least, I think it's, a deciding factor in his run for the presidency. Which he didn't technically want to run, again, I'll be fair. I think he was the first of what people would probably say are these compromise candidates in the House or in the House during the election, the subsequent elections post Ulysses S. Grant, where they're just trying to find just non-opinionated people, and people who would be considered a moderate, people who voted along, you know, fair lines and were uncontroversial in a lot of ways. There's, I think James D. Blaine tries to run a couple times and ultimately ends up failing because, what was that? What the? Oh my god. You know what? I think that's, yeah, that just about decides it. Okay, we're just gonna go.
Yes, the crystals are spiking the money with a single voice.
That was pretty impressive.
Bring me more crystals, and I'll pay you cold hard bones. Huh? Oh.
The Lord giveth. The Lord giveth. Oh, the Lord giveth. This game, I swear, just knows how to brighten up my day.
Hey, see if you can find anything worth watching.
Welcome back to Behind the Hero. In yet another setback for the embattled Captain Quark, the Galactic Court ordered him to pay 6 billion bolts in damages.
6 billion?
Citizens suffering from personal hygienator syndrome. Only 2 days later, Quark was arrested trying to flee to Poketaru. The one-time hero, now full-time Zero, was placed in custody awaiting trial. But the next day it was discovered that he had escaped, flushing himself to freedom. We will return to Behind the Hero after these messages.
What a nut! I almost miss that guy sometimes. Almost.
Oh god. Alright, I think we're gonna stop right here just for right now. Like and subscribe, y'all rock, and God bless y'all.